Welcome to the Shalem Institute of Spiritual Formation. I'm Liz Ward. I'm currently serving as the director of the Spiritual Guidance Program. I'm here today with my old and dear friend Dana Greene, who is a graduate of the Spiritual Guidance Program and author of Evelyn Underhill, the Artist of the Infinite Life, the latest biography on Evelyn Underhill. We're here today because this is the 100th anniversary of Evelyn Underhill's tome, Mysticism, which was written when she was 36 years old and has been in print continuously for the last 100 years. So Dana, why do you think this is considered such a classic?
Well, David Tracy, the theologian, says that what makes a classic is that when someone reads it, they know they've encountered a truth there. And many people have obviously encountered this truth in Evelyn Underhill's work. It's really an extraordinary book. As you pointed out, it's fat. It's 500 pages. It's based on 1,000 sources. And it's very unique. Underhill wrote this book to recapture the mystic's contribution to human life. She didn't want that to be lost. And so she offered it not only as an attempt to understand the mystic life. She developed the stages of the mystic life, for instance, in it, but also to offer her readers a kind of compendium of mystic statements, mystic facts. So in fact, this is a book that explores mysticism, which at the time it was written and still today is seen as a very esoteric, sometimes strange subject. And she was able to reclaim this. And I think the fact that it has lived so long, for a whole century, points to the fact that there is something that the mystics have to tell us, and she explored that for us in this volume. It's really quite a remarkable book.
One of the gifts of mysticism and of her 400 writings on the spiritual life and mysticism is an awareness of the connection between mysticism and the spiritual life. I wondered if you could talk a little bit about that connection.
Right. It's a very important connection. For the first half of her life, Underhill really spent plumbing these mystic texts and the lives of mystics. She wrote biographies of mystics. She edited mystic texts. And then at midlife, she had a change, really, of vocation. And she began to really reach out and bring what she had learned from mysticism to what she called normal people. That's us, normal people. And so she became really a proponent and an explicator of the spiritual life. And she did that through spiritual direction, what was then called the care of souls. They didn't use the word spiritual direction, and the giving of retreats. Every year she would develop a retreat, and almost like a circuit rider, she would take this retreat around to various retreat houses in England in the late 1920s and the 1930s. Her premise, the underlying premise of mysticism, was that to be human was to be born with a capacity for God, and that the mystics allowed themselves to have a great capacity for God, to become a pure capacity for God, but that each of us has what she called this little buried talent in us. Each of us has this capacity for God, and so we're linked to the mystics. They are kin, different from us, not in kind, but only in degree. So the second half of her life is to explore this for ordinary people. Underhill said that the mystic life was really not separate from ordinary life. It was rather the life that we live that is anchored in our experience of God. Everything that comes from that center where we're anchored in God. And she called prayer, the beautiful words, she said, it's standing beside the artist lover and seeing, beginning to see with those self-same eyes. In the third part of her life, she moved to a third vocation, the vocation of being spiritual director, of being retreat giver, flowing from her scholarly work in mysticism, and then this later vocation of being a pacifist, really carrying out what she called a corollary of the love of God, namely, even to be able to love our fellows. So there is a deep connection between mysticism and the spiritual life.
Many people consider Evelyn Underhill, one English pronunciation, one American pronunciation, to be the forerunner of contemporary spirituality. I wonder, Dana, what you would say about that.
Well, I think that's an apt designation for her. I mean, she not only reclaimed and preserved this mystic tradition. Her book was the introduction of mysticism to so many people, but she translated that to the contemporary mind. She was a woman who knew about war, she knew about violence, she knew about urban blight, she knew about the problems that we know about. And I like to think of her in that way, as a forerunner of contemporary spirituality. Another way of thinking about her is a fulfiller, really, of those words from the Book of Wisdom that says, in each generation, holy wisdom passes into new generations, making them holy souls and prophets, friends of God. Evelyn Underhill is a friend of God and a forerunner of the spiritual life as we've come to see it today.
Thank you so much, Dana, for bringing us this wonderful insight into this forerunner of contemporary spirituality, Evelyn Underhill, this holy woman of God. And thank you, friend of God, for being with us.
Great pleasure.